Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. And today we've got to talk about Ukraine. Now, if you're a longtime listener or follower of mine, you know essentially my stance on this war. And if you really want to understand it, you can go to my YouTube channel and go ahead and watch interviews I did with Ukrainian members of parliament at the beginning of the war. For the record, we are in day 998 as I sit here and talk to you on this war. And we have some developments here, and as well as technological advancements that we need to talk about, and that's Ukraine's killer robot army. And I think it may just save them. Now, here's what's going on, and there was a really interesting write-up in the Wall Street Journal by James Marson and Daniel Michaels on specifically this, but several companies, many of them from Ukraine, and quite frankly, just startups, have successfully been testing autopilot systems on the battlefield. But our focus today is actually going to be a US-based company known as Aturion. Now, they have basically a big breakthrough that essentially is here, which is mass-produced automated drones. Now, this is a significant step, and it has not really been reported on previously. Ukraine's drone suppliers are ramping up an output of robot attack drones on an industrial scale, and not just trying out prototypes. Now, enabling the upshift is basically producing successful integration of inexpensive computers into sophisticated compact systems that can replicate essentially the capabilities previously only found in far pricier equipment. And that's the big thing. None of this is actually really new, and that's according to Aturion's founder and CEO, Lorenz Meyer. The difference is the price, meaning Aturion is doing it for much faster and much cheaper than has previously been seen. That's a big boost. Now, Kyiv is set to receive tens of thousands of Aturion's miniature computers known as Skynodes, which should basically be hitting the battlefield next year. Now, Virai, I cannot pronounce it, Virai Drone, they're one of the top startups in Ukraine making drones, said that they would produce several thousand autopilot drones starting this month in November. Other companies are also ramping up production of this as well. Now, Ukraine, with a population of about 1/4 the size of Russia, has been reliant on maintaining a technological edge to hold off the waves of Russian tanks and infantry, and it has been working. If you didn't know, Russia recently basically got into an alliance with North Korea, where North Korea is now sending thousands of troops to the battlefront to essentially bolster, the Russian advance, because the Ukrainians have been taking it to them for literally almost 1,000 days. Now, the use of computer-controlled drones is particularly promising as it significantly reduces the number of people needed to carry out tasks such as identifying targets and then striking them. So these offer a cheap alternative to more expensive missiles and artillery shells that could help Ukraine maintain its defense if essentially their funding gets cut. And that is a very real possibility. The incoming Trump administration has not been friendly to essentially the Ukrainians. Donald Trump himself, when he was out of office, pretty much said the same thing, and he wants the war to be over, yesterday. I think we all do. But his version of that may be a lot of sacrifice and land that Ukraine has to give up. And Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, is pretty much aligned with that thinking as well. And he's also trying to play the fence here, knowing that you can't really piss off a new incoming administration, no matter who that is, too. So Ukraine's small explosive drones are already carrying out most of the strikes on their front lines. But here's where it's really helpful to the Ukrainian war effort. The large-scale production of autonomous drones could basically turbocharge Ukraine's fight against Russia by overcoming one of the biggest obstacles that the Ukrainians have faced as they are flying these drones and basically guiding them into whatever target it is. The Russians have been jamming them. But if it's an autonomous drone, there's no remote operator that essentially can have their remote jammed when it is essentially, for lack of a better term, thinking for itself, identifying targets. Now, obviously, that opens up, another can of worms. What if the drones screw up and hit a school bus full of children in the area as opposed to a Russian tank? And those are things that we are going to have to account for, and we're going to have to see. That said, that's a lot of misinformation and disinformation that Russia's been pumping out. So I could very well see the Russians basically saying, oh, Ukrainian drones are hitting civilian targets, et cetera, trying to undermine that when, quite frankly, the drones aren't. We're going to see what actually happens, and I think it's important to be aware of that. But we're not done with just the autonomous drone situation here, because these advances also place further developments on the immediate horizon, such as enabling one pilot to control a swarm of drones that can basically largely fly and coordinate with themselves. Tyrion is collaborating with Ukrainian startup Swarmer to bring autonomous swarms of drones to the front lines, while Vyrai, the one I can't pronounce, the drone startup in Ukraine, is working with Sign Engineering, another new Ukrainian company, to essentially get all of this done. Now, the Russians, for the record, are taking notice of this because Russia has also said it's using computer-guided drones to strike targets as well. So this is the future of warfare. We are seeing, excuse me, the development of modern warfare right before our eyes and right in, on our screens as the news broadcasts this kind of stuff. Now, in addition to this, several videos have also appeared online claiming to show Russian explosive drones basically guided by long fiber optic cables to avoid jamming and provide clearer video feeds, etc., etc. So the Russians and the Ukrainians are both leveraging this, but when it comes to essentially the warfighting capability of Ukraine, especially because they are outmanned, the drones make all the difference. And if you've got drones that can't be jammed, if you've got swarms that can, think and communicate with each other, let's say by line of sight or some other technology that can't be jammed, then what you may have is mass death and destruction raining down from the sky. One of the big issues that the Ukrainians have always had was they've needed air superiority. That is something that they are now starting to slowly get by virtue of getting American strike fighters in the zone, which are vastly superior to the Russian ones. But these drones are essentially what are stopping a lot of the advances that the Russians have. And so we're going to see what happens. On top of it, the United States has taken the gloves off to let mercenary organizations, think Blackwater type organizations. I know they changed their name. I can never remember what it is, but those organizations are now allowed to basically be into the theater of conflict as well. So essentially, we may see mercenaries bolstering the Ukrainians. And a lot of times these mercenaries are very experienced, former special forces, former military. And so they've got combat readiness experience. It's going to be, I think, an escalation. And I think Ukraine right now is making a big and hard push to essentially really stem the tide to gain footholds and advances, even with the bolstering of Russia by North Korea before the Trump administration takes place, in which case their funding may completely be cut from the United States. And I know NATO and the other EU countries that are in NATO are looking at how they can pick up the slack for that. But the point is that this may fundamentally change as we have a new incoming administration. That's not being political. That simply is what it is. So we're going to see what happens. At the end of the day, again, if you're a longtime listener or follower of mine, my thoughts on this war, and hopefully we're going to get the results that, quite frankly, Ukraine deserves. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.